held via Zoom webinar platform, and people from the city council chambers. On tonight's agenda, we have the approval of the minutes from November 2nd, department's opening remarks. We have a public comment session, which speaker cards will have to be filled out, and Travis, you're in the council chambers right now, so all speakers can hand their cards to Mr. Newberry. There is no public hearing. We have 2 items of old business. We have 1 information report and 2 items under the new business category. We also have a site development plan, record plats, 1 item for consideration. Moving on, I'll have a roll call of commission members.
Commissioner Helfrey.
Here.
Commissioner Beatty.
Here.
Commissioner Deppler.
Here.
Commissioner Levitt.
Here.
Commissioner Cohn. Commissioner Jackson. Commissioner Broyles.
Here.
Chair Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Brost.
Here.
Mayor Boland.
Here.
Moving on to the approval of the meeting minutes on November 2nd. I have a motion to approve the minutes. Councilman Brost, I need a second. Commissioner
second.
Helfrey.
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Moving on to the department, does Mr. Vinich, do you have any opening remarks?
Yes, Mr. Chair, with your permission. Mr. Chair and members of the commission, when we reach the last 2 items on tonight's agenda, I would like to request a motion second and a voice vote to switch those. So the item relating to the large water feature can be done before the annual report. And the department thinks that there will be interest in the large water feature item, and having them wait until the annual report discussion is concluded would not seem to be in the best interest of everyone. So thank you.
Okay, can I have a motion to, shall we put that in front of old business?
Not necessarily, it's just the annual report really generates probably only interest among the commission members and city team members. So therefore, it just seemed like a natural to switch that.
Okay, so we'll move it under item 8 in front of the correspondence item that's listed there, Grover Company correspondence. Is that what you like to do?
Actually, I just like to flip it in front of the annual report, that's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Seeing no issues with that, I will make the motion that we do that. I need a second, and then we'll just, okay. Commissioner Helfrey. So Joe, we'll go ahead and bring that forward.
Thank you.
Moving on to the public comment session. Mr. Newberry.
We have a commenter here in the council chambers, Mr. Ellsler.
I take my mask off when I approach.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. Microphone on this. Thank you. Good evening to everyone. I very much appreciate the opportunity to speak to everybody. Tonight, I've not had the privilege or opportunity to do so before. I'm here to speak with respect to PZ 15-17. 2 initial things. One, I am a Wildwood resident. I have been a Wildwood resident for 8 years with my wife and a newborn who was just born in August. And I'm not with him tonight because I wanted to speak to everyone here tonight, because that's the issues raised and implicated in that petition and application are very important to me individually as a Wildwood resident. I think I'm within Ward 3 in the Point Clayton district. Secondly, I'm also an attorney, and I am here speaking in that capacity tonight with respect to, or excuse me, on behalf of David and Diane Hudson, who couldn't physically be here tonight. And I'm sorry everyone else physically couldn't be here tonight. I have a number of ultimate requests with respect to this petition tonight. Number one, I am requesting that the conditional use permit be denied. Two, I believe that it is very appropriate that it be conditioned on the receipt and review of any signed and sealed engineering documents. Three, that all pre-treatment conditions be followed. I don't think that that in any way should be controversial. In fact, I think that should be something that should be strived for if it's ensuring that the water quality is appropriate in all respects. And number four, in the interim time period, that the waterfall feature not be operated night or day until all of this due diligence is followed and adhered to. That would include, without limitations, all of the appropriate permitting and inspections from all of the governmental entities. In reviewing some of the actions that were taken by this committee within the past few years, it's my understanding that in 2015 and 2019, there were similar or substantially similar water structures. The Taylor structure in 2015, and in 2019, I believe it's the GRU water structure. While they may not be identical, they are similar enough to the present structure that's the subject matter of this application. Both of those required all of the necessary permits and due diligence to be done beforehand. I think that this committee's actions with respect to those structures set a standard that should be followed. I think that a departure from that would be an abuse of discretion, would be unwarranted, and would violate existing precedents. It's my understanding that this facility has been installed without all of the proper permits. That would include electrical permits, that would include plumbing permits, and geothermal permits. I have personally been to that structure, the neighboring property, though it hasn't been recently, and I can personally attest to the sound and the odors that emanate from that. I'm not alone in that. Many neighboring property owners have felt the same way, and I know that they can vouch for that. And I believe that one or more or all of the council members who I'm speaking to now have received verifications and written correspondence to that effect. There's been a limited amount of testing done with respect to the water, particularly regarding the depths of the water as it relates to some of the pipes that are much deeper down. The single test that was done with respect to surface water illustrated and reflected that there were pollutants that were contained in there, and it was impaired under the meaning of state of Missouri regulations. In addition to that, there's a defect with respect to the structures or the setup of this, in that the recycling of the water has caused a concentration of algae and other harmful toxins in the water supply. I think that all of these standards set forth by the state of Missouri and the Department of Natural Resources have been followed and looked to for guidance previously by this council. Frustratingly, the petitioner and the applicant, who I don't see here physically present today, has intentionally not cooperated with this committee's directives, has not cooperated with the St. Louis County's directives. In short, there's been willful non-compliance with Department of Natural Resources inspectors, with St. Louis County inspectors, and from code ordinance inspectors here. I don't think that a intentional and deliberate and egregious non-compliance can in any way result in this committee approving that. Police officers have visited on more than one occasion and have observed and witnessed some of the nuisance activity that has occurred here. I think it's this committee's responsibilities, and I think that the codes of the ordinances support this, that it's the job to promote the public health, the welfare, and the betterment of individuals' property in such a way that isn't detrimental to the others. And finally, I've seen commentary and correspondence in some of the meeting minutes tonight to suggest that this is just the complaints by one set of owners or one owners. That's certainly not the case. There's more than one correspondence that's in the file tonight to reflect that this is a problem that affects numerous people around that. So I don't want any sort of mistaken impression that this is one set of individuals or one individual complaining about that. This is a widespread problem. I would cite to that the correspondence by Ms. Kozlowski and Ms. Gragnani, and I can go on. Thank you very much for your time. To reiterate, I would request that the conditional use permit be denied and that all of the due diligence, particularly the testing and pre-treatment, be done immediately before considering that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Newberry.
Mr. Chair, it doesn't appear that there are any others here in the council chambers tonight who wish to speak. However, we do have several people joining us via Zoom. I would just, with your permission, take the opportunity to invite anybody who would like to speak during the general public comment session of tonight's Planning and Zoning Commission to raise their hand via Zoom, and we will promote you to a panelist to address the commission.
Mr. Roberts has his hand raised.
Mr. Roberts is on his way into the meeting.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This is Tom Roberts, 500 Lori Lane. I'd like to respond to the comments by the attorney that just spoke. I think he might be a little Johnny come lately. This has been going on for 3.5 years. There has been extensive testing. There was 4 sound tests. They were all below the limits of the Wildwood Code. There were 2 water quality tests. Those were both acceptable by the consultant that Wildwood hired, that they did themselves, and he said that there was no problem. So the other thing I sent in also, the picture of the Kozlowski house, which is 675 feet away through heavy trees. And then I also heard him mention Gragnani. I don't even know where Gragnani lives. I can't believe this is a factor for them. I've had people out here. One of the issues is I've complied with the city of Wildwood and the request. I had it off, and then when the P&Z Commission did come out, it had been sitting with water in that pipe for months. When it runs for maintenance purposes, there's absolutely no smell. Anyone can come out and see that. We're here every day, there's no smell. The sound at the fence line is below the limits. That's been tested numerous times, 4 different times. So for the attorney to make a comment like that, I think he might be misinformed. Maybe he didn't totally do his due diligence. Let's see. He also talked about geothermal permits. I don't know what he's even speaking about, what bearing that would have on anything. But basically, I think he's misinformed on the sound and the order. And I would respectfully request that this be approved tonight. This has been going on for 3.5 years. The city of Wildwood issued me the permit to live here with the waterfall in place. And then months later, he came back requesting a CUP. At that point, if I would have known back then, I would have just said, I'm not doing it because I've got a occupancy permit from the city of Wildwood, but I cooperated and went through all the steps. So I respectfully ask that you approve this tonight and let's put this behind us. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Newberry?
Again, Mr. Chair, if we could just give a few moments to allow for any others attending via Zoom to use the raise hand feature.
Jean has a hand raised.
She's on her way in.
Ms.
Travis,
Fedvig,
oh, am I supposed to talk?
you are live.
Oh, thank you. I've been watching this for the last couple of years. And the thing that I think is important to keep in mind, that the property owner on Lori Lane, I believe Mr. Roberts, yes, it has been a long time, but he has not complied with the request from the city. And anyone else that did that would have been denied their conditional use permit. You have gone over solar panels, which are far less intrusive, with very explicit restrictions, and you have the neighbors write letters to comply or to agree. And this has been going on, and the property owner has not followed he has not met all the requirements that the city asked him to do. And you should deny his CUP tonight and allow this to start over. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Newberry.
Mr. Chair, again, I'm not seeing anyone with their hand raised currently, but again, we could give a few seconds to allow for them to do so if they would like to speak. Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing anyone using the raise hand feature on Zoom currently.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the next phase. Unless somebody raises their hands while I'm bringing up the first item under old business, PZ 8-20. Mr. Newberry.
PZ 8-20, City of Wildwood Planning and Zoning Commission, care of Department of Planning, 16860 Main Street, Wildwood, Missouri, 63040. A request to review and consider changes to the lists of permitted uses in all R residential C and M zoning districts, that district designation of the City of Wildwood's zoning ordinance, including the NU non-urban residence district, for the purposes of ensuring the mix of activities are still applicable and suitable for the locations where authorized or allowed. The applicable districts include the following sections of the code: Section 415.090 NU non-urban residence district, Section 415.110 R1 1 acre residence district regulations, Section 415.120 R1A residence district regulations, Section 415.130 R2 residence district regulations, Section 415.140 R3 residence district regulations, Section 415.150 R4 residence district regulations, Section 415.160 R6A residence district regulations, Section 415.170 C1 neighborhood business district regulations, Section 415.180 C2 shopping district regulations, and Section 415.200 M1 industrial district regulations, all wards.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Vunich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Department of Planning has prepared for your consideration tonight the draft letter of recommendation regarding the matter that Mr. Newberry just read into tonight's record. The draft letter of recommendation reflects the vote and the conditions associated with that vote that was taken 2 weeks ago tonight. As part of that vote, the Planning and Zoning Commission requested that drive-through facilities in association with restaurants, along with car washes, not be included or changed in this particular instance until such time more information, more public comment, and more research could be conducted to the benefit of the Commission's consideration. What you'll see in the C2 shopping district are those uses have been struck through and are no longer inclusive of this draft letter of recommendation. The third item related to the large water feature component. There was a desire to understand what high hazard meant. And in our zoning ordinance, we already have that definition of high hazard. So what you'll see in the different tables reflecting the range of zoning district designations here in the city of Wildwood I have done as a parenthetical that definition, again, currently already in the zoning ordinance. On the last page of the letter of recommendation is a set of lines, text, that reflect how the Missouri Department of Natural Resources defines low hazard, significant hazard, and high hazard. There was a request that the source of the high hazard definition be provided. So what I've done is taken that that definition or definitions from the Missouri Department of Natural Resources and included it as a footnote for the benefit of the commissioner's review. The department believes it's addressed the conditions that were associated with the favorable recommendation. And tonight, the letter of recommendation, again in draft form, is ready for final action. Mr. Chair, after a motion to proceed forward with a recommendation or the chair opening the floor for discussion, the Department of Planning will be available for any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. I'll open the floor up for discussion or a motion. Councilman Barost, are you just stretching?
I'm stretching.
Okay. Commissioner Helfrey.
I'm going to make a motion to approve.
Okay, motion to approve. Commissioner Beatty is second. Do we need a roll call vote on this? We do.
Mr. Chair, I've just asked if there's any discussion, and if not, yes, please, a roll call would be appreciated.
Not seeing any discussion. Roll call vote.
Commissioner Broyles,
May I pass for a moment, please?
Commissioner Helfrey,
Yes.
Commissioner Cohn, sorry, Commissioner Depler,
Yes.
Commissioner Levitt,
Yes.
Commissioner Beatty,
Yes.
Chair Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Brost,
Yes.
Mayor Bolin,
Yes.
and Commissioner Beatty, yes, Commissioner Broyles.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Travis, when you're ready, PZ 13-20.
PZ 13-20, Mark and Nancy Fish, 1570 Old State Road, Wildwood, Missouri, 63038, care of Sun Pro Solar, MCH Road, Mandeville, Louisiana, 70471. A request for a conditional use permit in the NU Non-Urban Residence District, street address 1570 Old State Road, locator number 25U440043, for the installation of roof-mounted solar panels, which are to be so situated on the dwelling and accessory structure, garage, as to be visible from adjoining roadways. This request is to be reviewed in accordance with Chapter 415.090 NU Non-Urban Residence District Regulations of the City of Wildwood Zoning Ordinance, which establishes standards and requirements for the installation of solar panels. The requested permit is required due to the panels' placement on the front-facing area of the roofs of the dwelling and accessory structure, Ward 6.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Vunich.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Department of Planning has prepared for your consideration tonight its information report with recommendation regarding the matter that Mr. Newberry just read into tonight's record. The matter relates to solar panels and their placement on two buildings or two structures located on this 3+ acre sized lot that fronts onto Old State Road. The intent of the panels are to provide energy, electricity to the home and the accessory structure, which is a detached garage. The Department of Planning, as is required under the zoning ordinance, reviews conditional use permits requests in the same manner as the Planning and Zoning Commission. There are 4 criteria set forth in the zoning ordinance for consideration. They relate to good planning practice, impact on permitted uses in that zoning district designation where the permit request has been filed, visual compatibility, and then community benefit. As the Planning and Zoning Commission is aware, there have been a number of these requests of late, and in most instances, the Planning and Zoning Commission has seen them from a favorable standpoint. We have, in recent time, granted conditional use permits for ground mounting solar energy systems, but primarily what we see are solar energy systems placed on the roofs of the buildings and structures, and those that are visible from the adjoining roadway are required to be reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. As noted, the 4 criteria were considered, and in the department's information report, it determined that the 4 criteria are being met. That good planning practice is being exercised in the case of solar energy systems, and they do not create any appreciable impacts on the property or the neighborhood or area surrounding it. It also, in that particular instance, good planning practice reflects an effort on the city's part to support sustainability and protection of the overall environment. The chart that is provided as part of the department's information report that indicates all of the solar energy systems that have been installed in the city of Wildwood is indicative of their minimal or no impact on the permitted uses in any of the zoning districts where they have been authorized. As you can see from the table, they are in the large lot area to the small lot area and everywhere in between. In terms of visual compatibility, that was always a concern and the key reason in many regards why we have these regulations. And as you can see from the department's report, the intent is to camouflage the solar energy systems as best as possible. And in this case, the petitioners, the Fishes, have done that in accordance with the requirements of the zoning ordinance. And then finally, from a community benefit standpoint, it is hard to argue that solar energy systems are not a benefit, not only to the individual where the system is located on their property, but to the community as a whole, as we lessen dependence on fossil fuels and hopefully in the long run, protect the climate of the globe and the place we all call home. So from that perspective, the department is recommending favorable consideration by the Planning and Zoning Commission of this request. I would note that Mr. Ingram and Mr. Fish have been promoted to panelists. They are the representative from the Solar Energy System Company and the property owner. And after the chair opens the floor for discussion or a motion is made, the department and those individuals will be available for any comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. I'll open it up for discussion or a motion. Mr. Beatty.
Motion to approve the department's recommendation.
Mayor Boland.
Motion to postpone as soon as that is seconded, if it is.
Okay, do I have a second? Commissioner Depler, second. Mayor Boland.
So before I make the motion to postpone, actually, I didn't see anything, but I could have missed it relative to elevations. This is on a major street, Old State Road. Do we have any elevations that depict what it will look like once constructed from Old State Road? I didn't see those.
No, the department did not realize that that would be a requirement, and so it did not ask Mr. Ingram, representing the Solar Energy System Company, to provide such. But as you know, from the public hearing, Mr. Newberry was able to take photographs from across Old State Road from the property and around the property, indicating that on 3 sides, the site is heavily wooded and they are fairly mature woodlands in that case. Thank you, Mr. Newberry. And with the permission of the chair, we'll go to those slides real quickly.
Yeah, and I'm specifically interested, Mr. Chairman, in the visual from Old State Road.
Correct. We had discussed that and during the meeting.
Mr. Newberry, could you go to the next slide, please? That one. So here is an instance of what I've described. First and foremost, as you can see, Old State Road is in the foreground of the photograph. The dwelling is in the center of the photograph, more toward the middle of it as well. There is a line of trees along Old State Road. There is a mix of types there. There's some evergreens as well as deciduous. But the department believes just from the standpoint of just the number of trees, even when the deciduous trees lose their leaves, they will still provide a good portion of the screening that would be desirable from Old State Road. And Mr. Newberry, if you could go there, thank you. Again, some of the pine trees that I've referenced in the report in preparation of tonight. And again, just one of the structures, and you can see there's some cedars as well as pines and other evergreen species. And as I say, this is, I think, a good image from the driveway, which is always a key visibility point. And generally speaking, there are one-story buildings for the most part. And as you can see, the one structure has somewhat of a flat roof associated with it. So my apologies to the petitioner as well as the Planning and Zoning Commission. I didn't realize we needed to ask for any type of rendering in this regard, so my apologies.
Mayor Boland?
Those slides are helpful, but obviously they were taken, the photos were taken with leaves on the trees. And I fully recognize that this is an environmentally conscious thing to do, and I support that. I also recognize that there are neighbors and others, as we've seen from the comments, that for whatever reason disagree. I do think it would be helpful if we had photos of the residents taken more recently now and looked at it at the next Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, just to be certain. And I wouldn't suggest this if this weren't on such a major thoroughfare, but it is probably the, other than Highway 109, the most major thoroughfare going through Ward 6. And we don't have that commissioner with us this evening, but I would recommend that we do that out of an abundance of caution. It's 2 weeks. I don't think that any harm will result from that. If anyone disagrees in terms of the petitioner or the petitioner's representative, I'm happy to hear why that would be an issue. Otherwise, I would make a motion to postpone for 2 weeks until we can have those photos, just to be certain that we know what we're voting on.
Okay, I'll need a second for that motion. Councilman Brost. Second. So we'll vote on the motion to postpone.
Can we have a discussion?
We can.
Okay. If this can be part of the motion to postpone, or Joe, if you could follow up, but the one comment that talked about setting a precedent, is that, if I had a home and I wanted to put them on the front of my house and I come to the city, and actually I do have solar panels on my house, but they're on the back. And the city says no, and then I made the case, well, wait a second, you've approved it for other people, even along a major thoroughfare. I mean, Joe, if that's something that either part of this or separately, if you could educate me a little bit on the concerns of setting a precedent that we may not want to set.
Well, the Planning and Zoning Commission is not like the Board of Adjustment. When the Board of Adjustment considers a variance request, they truly are just looking at the unique circumstance for that individual lot with that specific request. And so therefore, there is no establishment of pattern or precedent. what I would say in the case of a conditional use permit, they do build off of each other. But I believe from the standpoint of the department, the fact that we require roof-mounted solar energy systems facing streets to be part of a conditional use permit process eliminates any arbitrariness to the process, because again, 10 members of the Planning and Zoning Commission have an opportunity to basically discuss it, consider it, and act upon it. So from that standpoint, I think the risk is low because the Planning and Zoning Commission has treated them all differently as they've reviewed the requests that have been placed before them.
Mayor Boland.
Joe is, I believe we have the city attorney with us this evening. Joe is correct from a legal perspective. From a public PR political perspective, I can assure you, every person that drives by a house on a major thoroughfare that sees front-mounted solar panels facing the street will think that they have the right to do it.
The right if the Planning and Zoning Commission grants a conditional use permit.
Again, that is legally correct. Thanks.
It's a fine point, I'm sorry.
And what we are all concerned with, I think, is the screening of the panels from the street view. So we have a motion and a second to postpone. Let's, I think we act on that first. Shall we do a roll call or voice on this?
I believe a voice vote is fine for a
Okay,
postponement.
voice, all those in favor to postpone for 2 weeks, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay, we have 2 abstentions.
The motion passes by a vote of 6-0 to 2.
Okay, we're postponed. Joe, let's make sure we get good photos of what we are looking at here.
We'll do our very best. As the mayor mentioned, given the time of year, all the deciduous trees have lost their leaves, so we'll be able to have a clearer view of what we might see. And then I'll ask Travis to coordinate with the gentleman from the Solar Energy System Company to see if they may be able to do some kind of Photoshop or something akin to that as well, to give you as much information as possible.
Commissioner Levitt?
Yeah, just something to consider based on that one photo that we saw is the new garage that was built is right in view of that driveway. There could never be trees to be put in front of that. So that would always be visible.
Mayor Boland?
Just one last thing, a point of personal privilege. Mark and Kathy are actually very good friends of mine. And so ultimately I will have to, I believe on that basis, abstain from any vote. And it pains me greatly to have to raise these issues because I know they want to do it. But ultimately, and I hope they understand, my obligation is to the city and its residents, and that trumps all of that. So thank you for understanding that in advance.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, just one last point. Just so everyone is aware, Old State Road is a county arterial. I believe the posted speed limit is 45 miles per hour in this particular location. Mr. Beatty, I'm sorry.
It's 35.
35, thank you. My apologies. Even at that speed, I would probably err on the side of my opinion that it'd be difficult if you're paying attention to the road, which you should on Old State Road, to view much of anything that's off the road on a day-to-day basis. So we'll try maybe even doing a video and see how that looks.
Yeah, if you can shoot it from the car, that would be helpful.
And also the petitioner has raised his hand.
Mr. Newberry, I'll let you.
Yeah, hi, this is Mark Fish. Thank you for allowing me to speak. And just to give you a bit of context for the location of this. Yeah, we are on the there's a big curve right on the, where our property is, or right on the edge of it. So its speed limit is 35 miles an hour, which I don't believe many people really go that speed. I think they go faster if they can. And most people are looking at the curve, either coming around it or looking at going into it. So before we even bought this property 3 years ago, we didn't know the house existed because we never saw it, even though we lived in the area, because we never saw it there because we were looking at the road. Also, looking at, as far as the screen is concerned, we have planted about 8 or 9 pine trees in our property between our house and the road, which are fast growing trees. I know they're not quite as tall as we want them to be yet, but we would like to screen ourselves from Old State Road as much as you would like to have Old State Road screened from us.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Mayor Boland.
That's an additional fact that would certainly relate to the commission's, everyone but me, ultimate consideration. So Joe, relative to the photos that you're taking, if you could specifically get photographs of those trees that Mark just mentioned, and be in a position to delineate the identity of the species of those trees and what the expectation is relative to their growth rate, as Mark pointed out, I think that would be very helpful for those who vote on this ultimately. Thank you.
Be glad to do it, sir.
Okay. Are there any other comments? Seeing none, let's move on to new business. Shall we do PC 39-94?
Yes, sir, please.
A response to a communication from Diana Meckler, Adam Schaumstein, 16917 Manchester Road, Wildwood, Missouri, 63040, which is dated October 14, 2020, regarding St. Louis County's PC 39-94, the Grover Company, amended C8 Plan Commercial District, Town Center Workplace District, north side of Manchester Road, across from Grover Crossing Drive, street address 16917 Manchester Road, locator number 24V540163, that seeks modifications to the existing site-specific governing ordinance to allow the permitted uses authorized by it to include a store for retail purposes, pet supplies, and a coffee shop or cafe, future phase, along with certain updates if applicable. Ward 8.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Vonich.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, I would note that the petitioners have been promoted to panelists and are on screen tonight as well. And certainly after the department's presentation, can answer any questions the commission members might have. The Department of Planning has prepared for the Planning and Zoning Commission a recommendation report relative to this particular request. If you're not familiar with the property, there are a couple of items that I would like to share screen with you. The first is the approved site development plan. This particular plan was approved by St. Louis County in 1994 and authorized the conversion of an existing single-family residence into a commercial building for commercial purposes. The plan shows a small parking area at the front of the converted dwelling and a larger parking area to the rear. That larger parking area does not exist on the property. There is a parking area to the front of the building that has about 5 to 6 spaces, and then there are some parallel spaces along the eastern boundary of the property. If you're not familiar with the location, the Department of Planning can provide a photograph next. It kind of shows it from the perspective of Manchester Road. So I'm sure you're familiar with it and seen it many times if you drive on the roadway, but this is the particular site. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, 2 individuals have purchased the property and are interested in changing the use. The past use was a chiropractic office, which was consistent with general and medical dental offices that were authorized as part of the permitted uses. The intent in this case is to open a small retail store and eventually, as phase 2, the potential for a coffee shop and cafe. Currently, though, the petitioners are just seeking the retail aspect on site. In the report, the department notes that it does support the request. The support is premised on a number of factors. Key amongst them is that in town center, the parking ratios for medical and dental offices is for the most part identical to retail purposes. Therefore, the department believes that the current site with the parking areas can accommodate the change in use. Parking is always a key consideration in these types of situations. Additionally, retail activity in many instances is less intense than a medical or dental office. Medical and dental offices have appointments, which generates traffic throughout any part of a given day. In this particular instance, retail has longer hours typically, but may not have as many individuals during certain times of that span of hours. Also, the department would note that if the coffee shop and cafe do move to fruition, there is a requirement that the site development plan be updated to accommodate such. The department believes that with a coffee shop and cafe, the parking ratio does change. So the submittal of a new plan at that time is critical to ensuring that the site is functional. However, just with phase 1, the department believes existing improvements can easily accommodate it. The property owners are beneficiaries of the new streetscape that has been completed on Manchester Road in front of this site. Therefore, they have a high level of improvements, safe improvements for both people accessing into the site and leaving the site. These improvements now include a sidewalk, bicycle lane, and an improved driving surface. All of these factors indicate that the site can easily accommodate what I believe is an appropriate use under the town center plan, particularly the regulating plan, which designates this property workplace district. And as part of workplace district, stores and shops for retail purposes are considered favorably. The department has updated the ordinance to reflect more of the town center requirements, but all of these requirements would only be applicable if an expansion of the building work to occur or a significant intensification of the use at some point in the future. Therefore, tonight, the department is recommending the change to the permitted uses, which has initiated this request, but recognizes that for the interim, while phase 1 is in place, the existing improvements can accommodate such. Mr. Chair, after a motion to open discussion or a motion to proceed forward with a recommendation from the commission, the Department of Planning will be available for any comments and questions. And again, I would note the owners of property are on screen tonight as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gunich. The petitioners are on, so I'll open this up for questions or a motion or discussion. Do I have a motion? Mr. Beatty.
Motion to approve the department's recommendation.
Second.
Mayor Boland, second. I think we have a motion and a second. Seeing no other discussion, let's vote on this. Mr. Newcomb.
I do have one quick question. It doesn't
Okay,
really
Mr. Beatty.
affect my opinion, but with the new streetscape, is this in a spot where there are parallel parking spots along Manchester?
No, sir. I pulled the final set of plans for Manchester Road Streetscape Phase 3, and there are on-street parking to the east, and I believe some to the west, but not in front of this particular site.
Okay, I was just curious, but thank you.
But again, as you know, here in town center, more in the downtown district, those on-street spaces are shared parking. So anybody can certainly park there if they would choose.
For sure.
Mr. Newberry has a picture of it, possibly? Yes. There's the frontage, I believe. Is that correct,
Okay.
Mr. Newberry?
That's correct. This is looking west on Manchester Road.
There's a bike lane there instead of parking.
And this is looking to the east. The city's van is parked here in a parallel spot on the south side of the road.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Newberry, roll call vote.
Commissioner Levitt,
Yes.
Commissioner Beatty,
Yes.
Commissioner Broyles,
Yes.
Commissioner Hofree,
Yes.
Commissioner Depler. Commissioner Depler.
Yes.
Thank you. Gotcha that time. Chair Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Brost,
Yes.
Mayor Boland.
Yes.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Good luck.
Thank you. Have a good meeting.
Okay, moving on, we're going to change the order. Mr. Newberry, go to PZ 15-17.
A report with update to the Planning and Zoning Commission on its action regarding the site development plan for PZ 15-17 Babbler Farms LLC, care of Tom Roberts, 550 Lori Lane, Wildwood, Missouri, 63005. A conditional use permit in the NU non-urban residence district for a 59.9 acre tract of land that is located at the terminus of Lori Lane, locator numbers 20X630015 and 20X630024. Street addresses 500 and 550 Lori Lane, which it is now seeking direction from the members on its previous action relative to the pretreatment requirement for the existing large water feature, lake, and associated waterfall structure as defined by Section 415.030 of the City of Wildwood's zoning regulations. The large water feature is 3.4 acres in size, Ward 1.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Vodich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Department of Planning has prepared for your consideration a report. And in that report, the Department of Planning is seeking direction from the Planning and Zoning Commission. Before I seek that direction, I would note that, as you know, Mr. Roberts is on the call tonight. He spoke during public participation, and we could certainly bring him on as a panelist if it is needed. We would just ask that he raise his hand at the appropriate time. Back in July of this year, July 21st, 2020, the Planning and Zoning Commission approved the site development plan for the large water feature and accessory waterfall structure. That approval came after many months of discussion, site visits, testing, and many other activities to address concerns that had been expressed by the community about the large water feature and waterfall. At the conclusion of the discussion regarding the site development plan, there was a short list of conditions associated with that action the Planning and Zoning Commission requested that the petitioner meet. Through the process since July, many of those conditions have been met. The remaining two relate to the items identified in the department's report. In reviewing the pretreatment requirement, the Department of Planning requested assistance from the city's Department of Public Works. The assistant city engineer asked that the design of the pretreatment have a engineer's seal and signature associated with it. Also, the department was requesting that the pretreatment detail sheet not just be submitted as an individual piece of paper, but be reflected on the site development plan sheet itself. That way, the engineer's seal and signature would guarantee that it would be constructed in accordance with Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District standards and as reflected on the plan sheet itself. The other item related to a request for permits relating to the pumping system in association with the waterfall structure. Mr. Roberts is correct. The single-family dwelling did receive a final use and certificate of occupancy, but that is a different structure than the waterfall feature itself. And again, the department was requesting this per the action of the Planning and Zoning Commission on the site development plan to ensure that a pumping system was installed safely and functions at the intended level that is set forth in the code. Over the course of discussions, Mr. Roberts continued to be cooperative and submitted a number of items to address, again, all of the conditions. These last two have reached a point where Mr. Roberts submitted an email with some level of frustration and said that he would prefer not to proceed forward. At least that's the interpretation of the department, and that email is provided as part of the report. Knowing that we had reached what I would consider an impasse, the department wanted direction from the Planning and Zoning Commission. I would note we are very close to completing the site development plan. Even if the permits were not obtained for the pumping mechanism and any components of the waterfall structure, Mr. Roberts would not be the first one to proceed with construction without permits. There is a process to address that, and that can be addressed after the site development plan is completed. And again, what's delaying the completion of the site development plan is showing the pre-treatment detail on the plan sheet itself and having an engineer sign and seal it. With that simple step, I believe the process can be completed and the plan would not need to come back to the commission because again, you've already approved it with those conditions. Again, many of which have been met at this time. If we can't proceed forward, then the department is at a point where it can't sign the plan unless the conditions are changed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And if the conditions are changed, direction to proceed forward imposing the conditions, or if everybody just feels like we've reached that impasse, begin a process to revoke the conditional use permit, which is the requirement of the zoning ordinance in this particular instance if non-compliance is not addressed. So I've laid out the options in the report for the commission members, but I would want to emphasize this isn't as complex as it may seem. We need one action on the part of the petitioner to address the pre-treatment requirement. And if that action is completed, the process would be done. Mr. Chair, I do not have a requested motion. I'm here to seek direction on how the Planning and Zoning Commission would like to proceed. And with that, I'll conclude and note again that I'll answer any questions I can. And certainly we've hoped that we can find a solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vonich. I'll open this up to the Planning Commission, Mayor Boland.
So before I get to a comment, I just want to, I guess, ask a question to make sure we have this issue in context, which is we are essentially debating, and this is a question, the pre-treatment of water in a facility, a waterfall, that after exhaustive analysis by the city's hired consultant and the petitioner's consultant were never able to state that there were any contaminants that were aerosolized or otherwise to anyone. Is that a correct statement?
Well, again, what I would state is that all of the concerns of the surrounding community were voiced before the vote on the site development plan was completed. The department would have not recommended, nor do I believe the Planning and Zoning Commission would have approved the site development plan if there was any risk to public health.
Okay, yep. So I think the answer to that is essentially yes. I mean, in other words, we're looking at, and I'm not asking that question rhetorically, I just want to put it in context that and I'm not saying it's good or bad or indifferent that we're doing it, but we are examining pre-treatment of water that there has been no proof at all, to my understanding. And that's why I asked the question, that anything in the water is presenting any kind of risk to anyone, essentially. So that's just a statement I wanted to make. And then sort of, I'm a pragmatist. So to get to the bottom line, what we actually approved, my recollection as the commission, was up to $1,000 being spent by Mr. Roberts for pre-treatment of the water. And in reading your report, Joe, what it seems to me to be the case is that there is a dispute as to whether that is done in the way that our city's engineer has recommended, or in the way that Mr. Roberts and presumably his engineer is recommended, with the wattles versus whatever's recommended by our city's engineer. So is that also correct, that we're basically at this point with an issue of everyone agrees to do pre-treatment? Mr. Roberts is agreeing to do it up to $1,000 annually. That's what the commission approved, but we're looking at a difference in how it's done. And my recollection is when we approved that as a commission, we didn't specify it had to be done this way or that way. We just said pre-treatment, but we'll get to that in a minute. So, but essentially is the debate between whether it's done with option A or option B. Is that the case, essentially?
If option A reflected treatment of the water feature itself, yes, that was the initial discussion that the Planning and Zoning Commission held. And we talked about copper oxide being placed in the water. We talked straw bales being added. We went through a range of options. And ultimately, all of those had to deal with a price point. And so the final action, based upon the July 2020 meeting, was to not necessarily do the treatment of the water, but treat the water coming into the large water feature. That way, there is no requirement to do a daily, weekly, monthly, to every 2 months, every 6 months, etc. And that the pre-treatment, if installed according to the MSD detail sheet, would do an effective job, as it does with any parking lot or large impervious surface, or in this case, something that is being pumped from the large water feature to a waterfall structure. So we debated both approaches, and we ended up with pre-treatment, thinking it would be a installation, a cost associated with it, but once installed, complete and done.
Right. And if I may, Mr. Chair, just to continue, that is correct. But as to pre-treatment, I don't think we went down the avenue of whether it's done this way or that way. At the end of the day, as a pragmatist, we have the petitioner who has sent an email, Mr. Roberts, saying that I believe I read his engineer has advised that the way he's doing it is actually better. And I'm not an engineer, as our chair is. And so I can't really aver one way or the other. But one option for the commission to consider might be to simply have the petitioner sign an affidavit, or his engineer sign an affidavit to that effect, i.e. that the pre-treatment that has been approved by the petitioner's engineer is as good as or better than what our city's engineer is recommending. And we put this to bed finally.
Mr. Mayor, that's exactly what I'm seeking from the commission, this direction. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Brost.
Yeah, I guess, Mayor, and maybe Joe, you were saying the same thing, but what I read into maybe on your comments were several items that seemed to be that we had a little tug of war over form versus substance. And it seems like in general, the substance is all there, but let's take a couple more years and argue about the form of the issue. So I think if we look at the substance of this, we're done. Okay, Joe, you and I were both out at the property. It's not a rundown property. There are people that are going to take care of their home. And one other thing is, I got an email from a past commissioner, and I think everybody did. And I wasn't really sure about this until I read this email, and supporting getting this over with, approving it moving forward. But the email basically says, without treatment of the lake, there is considerable potential harm to the surrounding properties. It is also my understanding that contaminants have been found in a well water of surrounding properties that are potentially coming from this lake. So after 3.5 years, there is nothing that says there's a problem. And this is not my email. So I'm looking at it saying, if there was a problem, I think someone would have brought it up. So I think we're arguing over the form, and maybe you need it a certain way, Joe, but I don't want to spend another 3.5 years on this. And if the Roberts and the Hudsons want to go litigate the matter, let them go litigate it. But I believe the substance of the matter is done. And it's time for the city to just, maybe the wrong term is say, suck it up. But we need to move forward. And not everybody's going to be happy. But the substance is there. So thank you.
And again, that's the direction I'm looking for. There's a majority of the commission members feel that what Mr. Roberts is proposing or has been doing is sufficient. The department will accept that.
Mayor Boland.
Travis?
Hang on just a second. Mayor Boland.
Actually, Commissioner Depler raised her hand, so
Okay.
I would be interested to hear her before I speak.
Commissioner Depler.
Thank you. Yeah, so I don't have the data in front of me, but I know that there was data presented that seemed like it was approaching some kind of potential issue with limits on some of the testing. So I think having some kind of pre-treatment water is an important thing to not miss. And his engineers have said that his, swaddle technique is efficient as the other, but I have not seen that data. So I don't know if I am willing to take his word on it at this time. I still have concerns that he seems to have not wanted to comply with any of the things that we'd ever brought up. And that will be my hesitation to go forward with this, though I understand all the points that have been brought up by Mayor Boland and councilmen, but I still have hesitation that he will actually comply with anything that we have proposed, as he has kind of shown historically. I just want to give my opinion about that.
Mayor Boland.
I think that Commissioner Depler raised a legitimate point. The one thing that I would say as a caveat is that if we had a graph presented to us that showed each and every instance of a requirement that we have placed on this fountain since it began, I suspect that it would exceed exponentially any similar requirements that we have replaced, any requirements that we've replaced on a similar waterfall feature. And at the end of the day, as a practical matter, as I mentioned earlier, if the petitioner is willing to say, as he has, that, and his engineer, that this, in an affidavit or what have you, is equivalent to what has been suggested by our engineer, I think that at this point, given what we have placed in terms of strictures relative to this particular project that, to my knowledge, in my entire time with the city, we have never done, ought to be sufficient. And so I'd be willing, I guess, to go with that maybe for, a year or so and look at it. But at the end of the day, not only as a matter of all of those facts being the case, but also even if there were something in the water that, not just being in the water, but that was shown to be a contaminant that could affect people. So it's not just being in the water. There are lots of things in the water, there's lots of things in the ground. But was it shown conclusively after many hearings that we've had on this and discussions that it affected anyone? And I think the answer to that is no. And if that were different, my thought on this would be different, but it isn't. So with all that in mind, I would move that, given what we approved, which was a pre-treatment up to $1,000 annually. So it has to be done every year. We didn't get into how it's done. And now we are. So I would motion that up to $1,000, same motion we had, with an affidavit signed by the petitioner that states his engineer has indicated what he said in his email, which is that the Waddle approach is at least as good as or better than what the city has proposed from its engineer, be approved, and we move forward and we revisit it in 1 year if there's any instance of anyone that can conclusively prove there's a reason to do that. That's my motion.
Commissioner Helfrey.
I just have a question, just for clarification's sake. This is to approve the initial CUP. And so if this all were to be approved and this goes forward, it is going to be, it's up for reapproval again in how many years?
I don't have the conditional use permit right in front of me, but I believe it was a 3-year time frame.
So we approve it now, then it would be, or we approve it or don't approve it. But if we approved it now, then in 3 years, he has 3 years to run it and do whatever. And then in 3 years, it comes back in front of us. Is that correct?
Actually, it may be the first year. There may be an annual review, then thereafter 3-year reviews or even longer.
Okay. Well, that
Mr.
doesn't,
Leary, can you look that up while we're
And if I could, Mr. Chairman, my motion actually states that we would look at it within a year if there's proof from anyone that this is causing an issue, not conjecture, but actual proof that we would look at it. So even if it's 3 years or whatever, this would shorten that, the motion.
Councilman Burrows?
I saw a note on my screen that Tom Roberts was trying to talk, but he didn't have the raise hand feature.
I think what I'll do is have him come in at the end of this rather than ping pong back and forth. One thing I want to comment on is, as a planning commission, we did not decide on which method of pre-treatment this was. So if he has a pre-treatment, I'm in support of what Mayor Boland is saying, that we get their engineering documents and prove it.
With all due respect, Mr. Chair, we provided the MSD detail sheet as part of the July 21st packet.
And I understand that, but there's other system that they have, they're proposed that we haven't really seen, other than it was the hay bales to try to filter the material that's coming from the inlet at the other end of the pond. And also MSD's issues with the bioretention is more intended to take pollutants out of a public body of water, streams and things like that, and to put a first issue of filtration before a detention system. This is actually a pond, so the intent for pre-treatment was to keep the pollutants out of the pond, which was the Planning Commission's intent. So if there's another method of doing that, and we can get the engineering documents to prove such, then the compliance has happened or occurred in my mind. So, and then it goes on to, basic conformance to the CUP and more of a regulatory issue at that point. And I think that's what we need to do. The city check the compliance of it, and then we reinvestigate this when it comes back to us in a year.
Yeah. And if I could, as a point of information, just to tag on to your comment, Mr. Chairman, and Joe, I think you're correct that information was provided, but with all due respect, the motion passed by the commission was simply that the pre-treatment be done. The motion wasn't that it be done in accordance with what was specified by the department. And I'd have to go back and look at the minutes. I don't think that's the case. So, I don't know if the city attorney wants to chime in at this point, but if we passed a motion that said, as I think we did, that the petitioner, Mr. Roberts, has to pre-treat up to $1,000 annually, and he's provided any kind of basis to do it, he's probably in compliance with what we approved, period. So my motion is actually going beyond that, but that's just for edification. Thank you.
At this point, I'd like to bring Mr. Roberts in.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. A couple of comments I'd like to make. I agree with the comments that Mayor Boland made. If you look at the pre-treatment facility that the city suggested I use, that would work fine for a parking lot, as Mayor Boland said, where you can sculpt the parking lot to go in front of the water all to one channel. And I think you have a copy of the pre-treatment facility that the city recommended. That's great for a parking lot, but for a waterfall, not a waterfall, for a lake with water infiltrating from various different locations, if you put that pre-treatment facility like the city wants, it would probably collect 3% of the water, 5%. It's a very, very small amount because it's coming from not just one location. So the best use is to filter the water out with the straw wattles around it and catch anything that would be coming from the rain. So we believe that the best way to pre-treat the water is what we are doing. And again, forget the city and what you're thinking. I've got to live here. I'm doing what's best for the property, and for me, I'm the one living with it. So, I want to comply with the city's request, but again, I'm doing it for my purposes too. The other thing I'd like to comment on, there was a comment made that I have contaminated the water. I'd like to just go on the record and debunk that. First of all, I'm drinking the exact same water they are, and they're way further away from it than me. Second of all, if she is correct and the water is leaking out of the pond would be empty. How could it hold water if it's leaking and contaminate anything? So that's just hysteria, and I want to put that on the record that is incorrect. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. So Joe, moving forward, we have a CUP with open items that need to be closed. And I can ask the commission, but I don't think there's any one of us that want to change any of the conditions.
So my motion is, Mr. Chairman, my motion is on the floor to move forward with the affidavit as previously mentioned, with a review within 1 year, if there's evidence of any kind of health hazard, conclusive evidence as to any kind of health hazard to anyone at that point.
Okay, so we do have a motion to change this, even though the underlying issue is the same, to pre-treat. I'll need a second from Mayor Boland's request. Commissioner Beatty, second. So is there any further discussion? We'll vote on, okay. Commissioner Depler?
So I just want to make sure I'm voting for what I think I am. So is Mayor Boland's suggestion that we remove the prerequisites that we've,
No.
or just go ahead with what we had approved before?
He's asking for documentation and then review it within a year with proof.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mayor Bowen.
In effect, Commissioner Depler, the motion not only reaffirms what we decided previously, which is up to $1,000 should be spent annually by Mr. Roberts for pre-treatment. It goes one step further in asking for an affidavit or obligating him to provide an affidavit that, as he said in his email, and tonight, that the methodology utilized based on his engineer's advice is at least as good as or better than what has been proposed by our city's engineer. And we review in 1 year if there is any conclusive evidence of any health issue by anyone as a result of that. So it actually ups it.
Okay, I thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Helfrey.
I have one question before we vote. Mr. Vunich, in the paperwork for this, on page 2, there's letters A and letters B, and letters A, it refers to the pre-treatment, and letter B refers to the permits associated with the waterfall and the pumping system, and for those to be provided. And so are we voting on that part as well? My question is, are you, according to this, is it being stated that they have not submitted electrical and plumbing permits for the waterfall? And is that part of the vote tonight, or you're asking us what to do about that as well? Thank you.
The department has no record of those final use and, certificate of, we have no verification that permits were obtained, at least here in our office. And I've asked Mr. Roberts to produce those. The system itself is substantial, so they would have been required to obtain permits, the pumps. But certainly that can be something that Mr. Roberts and I address offline, so to speak, and we can figure that out, certainly.
Okay, Mr. Vunich.
Again, I just want to define the conditional use permit contained an annual review after the first year, and then thereafter every 3 years.
Okay.
With the permission of the commission. I appreciate the motion, and that's exactly what I wanted, was direction. But as you recall, the site plan subcommittee reviewed this. And in the report, it says the site plan subcommittee recommends the following. The appropriate plan sheets need to be updated to reflect the pre-treatment requirements set forth in the permit and by members of this subcommittee. The pre-treatment requirement must follow Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District standards and details for a drainage area that provides flow to a 3.5 acre large water feature. So again, that's in the report. I support the motion if the commission by majority agrees, but I want to make sure you understand that we just don't make things up at the Department of Planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Let's do a voice vote. All those,
I think it has to be a roll call vote.
does it have to be a roll call to do the change? Okay, so roll call vote.
Commissioner Broyles.
Okay, let's make sure I know what I'm voting for. I know we've hashed it out several times. Could you repeat it, please, one more time, Mayor Boland?
Mr. Chairman, are you okay with me doing that?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay, thanks. So to recap, the commission previously passed a motion that there would be an annual pre-treatment done by the petitioner, Mr. Roberts, at a cost not to exceed $1,000. Joe is correct. The there was, I'm assuming, I don't have the data in front of me, but I'll take him at his word that there were data in the material that we were presented that related to certain ways of doing that. But nevertheless, my recollection is that the commission's motion did not get to that degree of specificity. It simply said that there be pretreatment. So a dispute has arisen between Mr. Roberts and our department as to exactly how that's done. But Mr. Roberts has said on a couple of occasions at least that his engineer's recommended way of using wattle ponds is actually more effective at any contaminant decreasing, as he has explained tonight. So the motion, to answer your question, is that we continue forward with what we passed previously, which is that pre-treatment up to $1,000 annually by the petitioner be done, and that we review it annually in the way he's indicated, with an affidavit from him that states what he has told us in emails and tonight, that is the better way to do it, and that we review it in a year if there is any conclusive evidence that there is contaminants that are exposing anyone to any harm. So we're actually reaffirming what we decided earlier and upping it somewhat.
And does that also include the affidavit, the engineer signing off on that? Which I think you said earlier.
The affidavit would be from the petitioner, but it would aver in the affidavit that is the advice he's been given from his engineer.
So the engineer would not sign off on that?
He would not, and my reasoning for not including that is that the cap is $1,000, and I suspect that was previously approved by the commission, and I suspect that if we require his engineer to sign and seal and certify, it's going to get way more than $1,000.
Okay, that's very clear, and thank you for that explanation, and thank you, Chair Lee. My vote is yes.
Commissioner Helfrey,
Yes.
thank you. Commissioner Doppler,
Yes.
Commissioner Levitt,
Yes.
Commissioner Beatty,
Yes.
Chair Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Brost,
Yes.
Mayor Bolin.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Mr. Newberry, are you reading the Planning and Zoning Annual Report?
Yes, sir. The City of Wildwood Planning and Zoning Commission's annual report for the calendar year 2020 is set forth in its amended bylaws, which were adopted in 2019, all wards.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, in 2019, the commission updated its bylaws. Many changes came to the bylaws, one of which related to an annual report. The Planning and Zoning Commission felt an annual report would be beneficial to see what they've accomplished in the past year and to see what the future work plan should include if things weren't completed or if new items were generated from the completion of old items. Tonight, the department has prepared for your consideration the annual report, consistent with the requirements of the bylaws. It will be presented to you tonight, and with your acceptance, we'll forward it on to City Council for receipt and filing, so they know too what the Planning and Zoning Commission has been working on in 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. Are you asking for any discussion or comments?
If there are any questions, Mr. Newberry and I would be glad to answer them, but if there are not, again, we would just seek your direction if that's acceptable as it is in form, or if there are if there are things that are missing.
Commissioner Helfrey.
Well, I looked it all over this weekend and I just want to say it looked pretty good. Makes it look like we've really been busy and we've been doing lots of stuff. And I want to thank you for all the hard work that you and Travis and all the other powers to be at the city have done to put this together for us.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Vunich, I can turn it back over to you.
Well, again, thank you. And in 2 weeks, we'll have our draft work program for the year 2021 for your consideration. And before we close tonight, I would just like to acknowledge Mr. Levitt. Today, he formally submitted his resignation. He is moving to the Chicago area with a new job. We'll certainly miss him, as I'm sure you all will, but it's an exciting opportunity and we only wish him the very best. Thank you.
He has to send sandwiches back.
And he can't become a Cubs fan.
Oh, for sure.
We'll miss you.
Mayor Boland.
Fortunately, there's no such motion as a motion for admonishment.
Yeah.
All right.
Good luck, Mr. Lovett.
Yes, we wish you well.
I think you need your long underwear up in Chicago.
Yeah.
Seeing no other items on the agenda, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
And okay, a second by Commissioner Broyles. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We are adjourned. Thank you.